Thanks for joining. Today is December 11th, 2024, and this is the architecture review meeting for fulfillment, session one. I have the first item. It's just a quick one, just to mention that we have a couple upcoming sessions that align with some major holidays, and we have a lot of people anticipated to be out. So on Christmas Day and New Year's Day. So I went ahead and canceled those since, we anticipate low attendance probably. Um, but yeah, I look forward to finishing off this year strong, and we can pick it back up in the new year in January. But yeah, we also have another item from Bishwa, so I can send it over to you.
Hi. Yeah. So wanted to talk about this the OKR that we are working on provision, me and Corina, regarding alignment of self-managed and GitLab.com provisioning. So in this new way, we are trying to change the way provision is getting done, and for that we want to change in a way that there is only one HTTP request from CustomersDot to GitLab, instead of at the moment, if you look at the applied plan for worker, we like make multiple requests over there. So yeah, to start with, I will kind of share my screen. Probably it gives a bit of um, just a second. Sorry about that.
I could jump in here, maybe, if that helps. Yeah, we're currently trying to work on aligning provisioning between GitLab.com and SM. And for this call, we have a question around how we should handle multiple things from CDOT to GitLab. And the way it's supposed to work is that every time a namespace has to be synced from CDOT to GitLab, we will create a record on the GitLab.com side to indicate we have something to process. Then a job should process this information for the namespace. This is currently, if you think about the current way a namespace is provisioned, there are multiple API endpoints, and we want to solve everything via a single API endpoint. So we have to process multiple records in one single in one API endpoint. And there could be multiple things at the same time. So if we create a record, we actually only want to process the most recent one. And if a record was successfully or unsuccessfully processed by the GitLab.com side, GitLab.com will send a request to CustomersDot to indicate this sync has been processed, and then we save a state if it's completed or if it's failed. And now the question is, if there are multiple things around the same time, how we can ensure that we provision the right things. But maybe Bushra can go into that detail a little bit more.
Yeah. So any questions so far regarding the background?
Yeah, just one thing. So our goal is to provision a namespace on GitLab.com by using a single request, and because the single request can can contain several payloads that needs to be processed on the GitLab.com site, and we need to find something to ensure that these payloads will be processed in the like required order, right?
Yeah. So we'll probably using transaction or something to make sure that all of the records are either updated or rolled back on GitLab side, if that's what you're thinking about.
And we have a table, a new table on the GitLab.com side for each of the syncs that it receives.
Yeah. So it's more like since we don't want to work on we don't have this, sorry, since we don't have persistent, persistent background worker over there. So we just, and also we don't want to wait for the HTTP call to like update all the things like probably namespace, compute minutes and add-ons and all these things. We just want to create a record with the data, like, hey, here is a record, and then I got it, and then I'll work on it. So it will enqueue the job and then send back like status okay. And then once the job process, it will send back again another call saying like, hey, like the job was successful or not. Let me share the blueprint over here. I think it becomes a bit more. Yeah. So something like this. It will trigger. Yeah. So over here, like first user creates update subscription. It checks for the existing sync record on the customer side. And if there is no record, it will create a new one and it trigger a sync for GitLab. And then, it will set the, sync last attempted date. Here, the GitLab will probably enqueue your worker later, after creating the record so that it doesn't wait. Then the worker will do all the required provisioning of namespace, add-ons, compute minutes, and whatever we have, and then send back a sync response again to CustomerDot. And when we get the sync response, we update the record saying like, okay, the sync was successful, or the sync was, if there are some kind of failure, which should not be, but if we have done the sync failed. And yeah, if we could either do, sometimes could be a reason we need to do manual resync, or we could also have a cron job that goes through those records that were failed and try again if it was based on something different change. So that's what will happen. It will do the same thing. It will trigger a sync, and then probably it will do the same thing. Like, so the sync will enqueue the worker, and then the worker will send back the response based on if it was successful or not. The flowchart would look something like this. Yeah. So yeah, namespace can change info, create a new namespace record. Yeah, and also like on the customer side, if even with the multiple sync, let's say manual sync, if let the subscription hasn't changed anything, we won't create a new record. It will still have we'll just use with the old record over there. Does that make sense? Okay. So my yeah, so the thing I wanted to talk about was ordering. So I was talking with Corina and I we're talking Slack before, and I thought like we need some kind of versioning or sequencing for that, because I think I feel like it's a classic message queue problem, since we depend upon workers on both CustomerDot and GitLab side. There could be many reasons. For example, let's say a subscription gets created and then I can update it within a quick time, like, you know, within a short period of time, or let's say the throughput of Sidekick in CustomerDot goes really high. So like there is big jam, and then after some 30 minutes, 40 minutes, all the queue get free, and then the worker starts to work. Then we would not know, like, if the change of, you know, let's say if the subscription was changed, you know, which sync gets called. And even if there was no such thing, like there could be network delay or something, so that the request on the GitLab side may come out of orders. So that the first request that the customer that's called may be served by GitLab on the second place. Does that make sense? So like it's more like two service talking asynchronously via, let's say, message queue kind of thing. And since both are worker, we could have some big latency problem, and CustomerDot could not, let's say, process any job for a while because something went wrong, and then later all of the jobs get processed. So if there were two worker, like a first one, so the subscription, let's say, with change one, and the subscription with change two, these two HTTP requests, when they call GitLab, could reach in out of order. So if the second request gets served first, and then the first request gets second, then we will be kind of overwriting the, you know, the record on the GitHub side. So I was proposing we would need some kind of sequence number whenever we make this HTTP call on GitLab, so that we know, like, if the second request was already served and the first request that I've late, we look at the sequence number, and if sequence number is less than the first one, then we know this request is stale request, and we can either skip it, or yeah, we could just ignore it. If not, then yeah, there could be a chance of overwriting with the stale record on GitLab side.
So the workers are getting enqueued on the CustomersDot side. I'm just like restating some things to make sure I understand. They get enqueued on the CustomersDot side. They get picked off. So the information that gets enqueued is a snapshot in that point in time.
Yeah.
And when that worker process, or like when that job is being processed, we start to provision for that snapshot, which could be outdated, you're saying, versus where, like, currently when we provision, we call like that update GitLab plan info service, and it's just
then and there.
provisioning for, you know, as the current point in time.
So it's doing synchronous. So there is really less chance of, you know, I think currently too, if from some case there is a Julak, like there's a callback worker, and then, you know, like if we have out of order kind of thing, but could be there. But then at the moment we're doing sync call, so this thing won't happen. But if we do a sync call that we're trying to do, then even without worker, like even like if there was two HTTP requests made, you know, let's say in a short span of time, these two requests could be served by two different, could be served out of order from GitLab. So that's what I meant with this thing.
Is it possible to limit the enqueuing to a single request per namespace ID? Like a validation in the same queue, and then pick up the state at the moment the worker is executing instead of enqueuing the state?
Yeah, that could be done. But that will solve the worker part, but that would still not solve the HTTP request part, which could be, I mean, at least on the on the GitLab side, I think, because on CustomerDot side we don't have this like we don't have I think at the moment we don't have the what do you have in this thing in GitLab? The, you know, like in queue only once kind of thing, like for certain worker.
Yeah, okay. We used something like that in a worker once, faking. But in our case, it was a single worker per queue, so it was easier to check.
Yeah. So also, I think it's like not only workers. I think it's more about this call between two services, which also, I mean, worker is also there, like that. That's also a problem. But I mean, like as a whole, since we want only one source of truth on the GitLab side, GitLab.com side, even, and there could be like multiple requests with, because on the customer.side side, it's like whenever something changes, you know, we make a request. So I think it will be robust or more like foolproof if we have this sequence number over there, so that we know which data request is the latest one. That's decided by CustomerDot by sending this, you know, version number, sequence number, or like one of those identifier. And on GitLab side, we just process it. Like we don't care about much about, you know, this logic of which is the, you know, yeah, which is the latest step.
Could we just send a timestamp along in the request to do this instead of having like an extra flag in it? I mean, we want to send a timestamp anyway, which will be sent back with the response from GitLab.com, so it could have two usages at once. Yeah, timestamp also could work as one of the identifier, because we just need to know sequence. And if timestamp goes in increasing, there could be one for sure. But sequence number, timestamp. But then we need to make sure on customer side somehow to have the timestamp every time somehow new whenever we make a sync for the latest request.
Also, if I think if you're gonna save all these things in a table, the identifier, the main identifier of the table, will also serve to sort them relatively.
Yeah, that's a problem. So usually it would if it was sync call, but because it's like could be multi requests. So if second request gets created first, you know, so like so the ID will be 5 and 6.
I mean in the CustomersDot, not in the game.
In the CustomerDot, yeah. In CustomerDot, yeah. If we have correct order, then that could be the one versioning for that. But I think like that will be quite. Yeah, we could also use that, but it will just probably jump between namespaces a lot. So we could have like our own like 1, 2, 3 if we can. I think for more readability. Yeah.
Yeah, no, outside of sending like an internal ID to a different system, outside of that, relatively they should remain kind of like this.
That should work.
Vishwa, do you have a clear vision on how we're going to identify the record to update when we receive the GitLab.com response on the CDOT side? Because initially I thought we could do that via the timestamp, but I realized that that's probably not a good idea. So maybe we want to do something like either send the ID of the record along with it, or do combination from the timestamp and maybe the namespace ID to not send the ID.
We cannot rely on created at. That's the reason we need to have some kind of sequence number. So either that, or we need to have a new timestamp dedicated just for that. For example, that could be like sent at or something like that. So something that's not created at, because created at an ID would not work. We need to have something different sent explicitly from CustomerDot that we can use as a identifier or like as a sequence number for which is the latest one. And we need to sort by that and pick that one, pick the latest one.
What? I still don't really understand why we can't use the created at timestamp on the CDOT side even.
Because if, let's say, if there is request 1 and request 2 and request 2 is the latest one, right? And if when it reaches GitLab, let's say request 2 gets called first and we don't have anything, any other ID, then the created at of request 2 will be less and the request 1 of created at will be more. So if you just use created
But
at,
it's a timestamp that we created on the CDOT side that we sent along with the parameters to the GitLab side.
yeah.
So
if,
CDOT knows for sure which order it was. If
exactly.
sync 1 was sent first or second, that's clear to CDOT, but GitLab doesn't know about it. But if we rely on the timestamp within those parameters, we should know that on the GitLab side as well, right?
Yeah, so that's what I meant. Like we cannot use created at of like a normal timestamp of record over in GitLab side. We need to have explicitly sent a unique identifier from customer side who knows which is the one. So it could be sequence number, it could be like sent at timestamp, it could be something, anything that's unique and that should be sent from customer dot. And that's what I meant with whole like sequencing. Could be timestamp, could be anything, but it should come from customer side and not like a normal like updated and created a timestamp that any table has. We cannot use that or ID for that because of this this possible edge case of
Okay, I guess I
just
just misunderstood that we cannot use the timestamp from the CDOT side either.
From CDOT side we can use for sure. I mean like sometimes if we go deep. I think from CDOT side we can use because every time we create a record, doesn't matter even if the Jura callback is out of order, we will create this info based on the I mean what I mean is that we will fetch the subscription information from the Jura and we will always have the latest one. So in CDOT side, we will have the always like the new record will be the latest information and we can use we can use the CDOT information. But the main idea I was trying to push was we need to have this record sent from customer side, like, hey, this is the record and this is the order you want to look into it. Like, and for instance, if let's say if request 2 was already processed and if request 1 goes late, then we can even skip it based on like checking the timestamp. And if timestamp or this ID is less than the one already in the record, return early because that's stale one. We don't care about it.
And do we still want to use something like a job list on the GitLab side to only enqueue a single job? Because with the timestamp or with this identifier to know which record is the latest one, there's no need to enqueue multiple jobs for the same processing, for the same sync processing for namespace, right?
Yeah, I mean, so you mean to say like if there are multiple syncs, do we want to enqueue multiple jobs, you mean, right?
No, we only want to enqueue a single job, even though we receive 3 syncs at once or within a short amount of time.
Yeah, I mean like that can be achieved by like enqueue only once or like something like that on GitLab side. And like doesn't matter which job, even if there was some small gap and then both job was enqueued, when we fetch the record, we need to fetch based on latest data based on this unique identifier from CustomerDot. So that would work. Yeah, I was writing some.
I mean, I wanted to ask you all if what is like, what would you consider in when will you consider okay to exporting an internal ID? For instance, we have GitLab namespace ID on our end, right? Because we need to issue calls regarding the namespace. And in this case, if this is, I don't know, let's call it a provision request, that's held in the CustomersDot end, but there is the expectation that GitLab will at some moment post to that endpoint for an update. Maybe it's okay to send the ID. Because if I'm correctly,
can you
there will
repeat?
be, so there will be a processing, like, I don't know what the name of the table is. So
So
On which side? The CDOT or the GitLab side?
yeah, the CDOT. So in case it's something like provision request, right? There is a provision request created.
I think the table name is namespace sinks.
Okay, the namespace sync ID, I think it might be okay to have on the GitLab end, especially if you need to issue a callback, like not a callback, it's like an issue request to update that record on CustomersDot.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns about exposing this kind of ID because it's related to a specific namespace, and I don't think it will be possible to query the data from this ID in any way. So it's not like it's accessible from the outside.
Yeah, the requests are going to be locked down anyway, secured. So seems like that's fine.
Yeah, we can use ID or we can even use like timestamp, like, whenever we send like sent it or like, requested it, timestamp, something like that, so that we could also talk with that. Or we could just simply use a counter on the CDOT side, whichever is easier, we can do that. But yeah, something
But we do need an identifier for the request from the GitLab to CDOT side to say, hey, I processed this sync request. And then we need to find the appropriate record on the CDOT side. So we need something to find this record that we need to update there. And we could either do that by the ID or, like I said before, a combination of the namespace ID and timestamp if we send it anyway. So we don't have to expose the ID. But I don't think it should be a big concern to expose the ID in this case. So we could go either way, but then again, we already have the namespace and the timestamp in the request anyway. So unless it's a bad idea to do a combination like that to find a record, then we could just use that.
I wonder how many records over time we expect. Just thinking, if you're querying millions, right, the ID might be faster rather than a compound key or something.
Definitely. That's the reason, like, either we can use ID or like just a counter 1, 2, 3 or a sent it. I think we don't need two two columns for unique identifier. But I get Corina's point. I think it makes we need to send since we will have different records for different versions on CustomerDot. We will need to send this ID anyhow somehow to get the ping back for that particular record.
So I know we're at time now. But I'm also happy to stay on if we feel like we're making progress and if it's helpful, or we could continue it another time. I know it's gonna be a while before we meet again in this session, but we could always schedule it again at a special one if it's helpful.
I think we are good here. Like, I mean, it was more like a sharing, and also like Corina and I, we had to discuss tomorrow, but we used this time, which is good. So if Corina is on board, and if all the team members also know what's going on, and unless there is some blocking thing, I think we can just go with this sequencing of like explicit descent from CDOT for ordering vision.
Yeah. Well, thank you for bringing it, because I mean, this is like perfect for this meeting, right? This is definitely an architecture discussion, and if nothing else, it spreads the knowledge of what's going on and the decisions that you're making. So thank you for sharing.
Thanks. Cheers.
All right. Talk to everybody
Thanks a
later.
lot.
Bye.
Bye.